Becky Liddon, I'm founder of Sensory Spectacle. This video is part of a series where I'm answering your questions about sensory processing difficulties. I've been given questions from parents and professionals, and it's all to help create a better understanding and awareness of sensory processing difficulties. Share the videos with your friends and families and colleagues, but also subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you don't miss any. So our first video this year in our winter themed home life playlist is all about cold weather. So as we come into winter, we know that temperatures change, but we often sometimes don't consider this into aspects of why we might recognise different characteristics and responses from people with sensory processing difficulties to their environment. So I'm just going to highlight some of the things as to why we might recognise different characteristics when the weather changes, so when it becomes cold in the winter. So let's not forget that visually, if it snowed, we're more likely to recognise our environment in a whole new way. Everything around us has become white. We're so familiar with waking up, opening our curtains and seeing the trees, seeing the houses, seeing the streets, whatever's around us in colour in the morning. And usually if the sun's shining, those colours are really heightened. But when it snows, all of that has changed. And so for people who might be hypersensitive to visual information, that change can be really difficult to understand and overwhelming for them to recognise. So you might recognise that people seem a little bit disorientated. We are, because we are seeing everything in a different way when we walk down the street. Rather than seeing the signposts and the hedges and the cars driving past, we're seeing everything all white. It's the same shapes, but it's a different colour, and for a lot of people that can be really difficult, really confusing to understand. So think about the visual change when we have cold weather. Not necessarily always snow, it can be when it's frosty. Everything has a slightly different glow and colour to it. Also, don't forget when it's frosty and the sun's shining, those beautiful winter crisp mornings, the glare and so the reflection from those surfaces can be really bright and really intense. So for some people, again, who are hypersensitive to visual information, that can be really overwhelming. For people who seek out visual information, so they're hyposensitive, they're looking for more information around them, you might notice that they absolutely love frost and the way that the sun shines and glistens around the frost. They might love the way that we see our shadows because the light is shining and it's more intense when our surrounding is white, for example, so when it has been snowing. Other things to take into consideration are the temperature. So obviously it's become a lot colder. The way that we feel temperature on our skin relates to our tactile and body awareness sensory systems. So we need to think about how do things feel on our skin. For some people, that intense cold feeling may be incredibly painful and difficult for them. Also, when we think about cold weather, we also need to remember that we're wearing different kinds of clothing. So when we wear lots of layers, we're aware of our body in a very different way. We are wearing a coat that's maybe a lot heavier and a lot thicker. And so for people that find it difficult to be aware of their body, that can be really supportive. But for people that find it very difficult to regulate their temperature, it can be really overwhelming, especially when they go inside and they're in school all day or when they're in work. When they've got lots of layers on, that can then mean their temperature isn't as easy to regulate. Also, when we're thinking about our body awareness, for people who find it a little bit overwhelming to wear lots of heavy layers, you might recognise that they don't like to wear coats and other additions, so hats and scarves and gloves, because already they're really aware of where their body is and what it's doing and how it's moving. Other things that we can consider are sound. So when we're walking in an autumn day and we're walking down the street, we might be walking on leaves. In a summer's day, we might be jumping, so the way that we're getting that sound input can vary. When it's cold, we may well be hearing sounds very differently as well. So if it has snowed, the way that the sounds are reflected very different, then they're a lot less intense because of the way that our environment's picking up those vibrations. So for people who are hypersensitive to sound, often when it snows, you might recognise that they're able to manage that a lot better. Whereas for people who seek out sound, and so they might be doing things to get more vibration input or more sound input, we're going to recognise there's more of a need to do that. So you might recognise humming more, you might recognise singing more, you might recognise tapping things more, because that sound input isn't being generated as it usually is through their environment. So those are some of the things that we can consider when recognising changes in characteristics due to changes in weather. So thinking about cold weather. You can find lots more in my weather book, which is the pale blue book on my website, where we talk about lots of different types of weather throughout the year.